I believe the only way to deal with issues associated with gun control in the United States is to challenge the effectiveness of the Second Amendment in 21st century America. I think that by aggressively threatening the Second Amendment with repeal is the only way to get the Republican Party and the NRA to deal responsibly with gun violence in America. I believe that it is the war on drugs that is directly linked to the majority of gun violence that exists in America. I believe that the lack of respect and trust of law enforcement is directly linked to abuses associated with the war on drugs. I think that the issues of poverty, race relations, and the undermining of our basic civil liberties are all directly related to the war on drugs. I believe that social Darwinism is the catalyst that feeds the war on drugs. The Second Amendment was created when America was primarily an agrarian society. In other words, a rural agricultural society. America is now predominantly an urban society where the rules of survival don't carry the same impact or the needs that it did when America became a nation. I believe that the aggressive effort by the NRA and the Republican Party to protect the Second Amendment at all costs underscores their failure to admit the fact that the escalation of gun violence in America is a direct result of the war on drugs. The Drug Enforcement Agency was created at a time when America was, and in my opinion still is, divided. There was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where Southern Democrats followed Senator Strom Thurmond into the Republican Party in protest. The events that lead to the creation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was, and in my opinion still is, considered a communist conspiracy. The same communist conspiracy associated with the Republican Party as the direct result of the paranoia created by McCarthyism. It was the FBI who illegally started investigating Americans in association with the civil rights movement under the justification that it was the work of a communist conspiracy. It was also primarily the FBI who had acted in behalf of Senator Joseph McCarthy during the communist witch hunt of the 1950s. There was the Vietnam War, where protesting the war was, and in my opinion still is, considered a communist conspiracy. The FBI, the DOD, the DOJ, and specifically the Nixon White House engaged in illegal investigations and persecution of protesters to shut down the peace movement. This is a movement that began with protesters acting in conjunction with our democratic principles. In other words, the protesters had the right to be heard and were aggressively persecuted for their beliefs. Some protesters, as a consequence, chose to pursue violence as a means of protest, but only after they were acted upon with aggression and violence by the law enforcement community. The war on drugs, in my opinion, was designed to exploit those divisions that existed in America at the time. The protesters of the Vietnam War, drug users, and civil rights activists were all deliberately grouped together as a means of creating a national security issue that had no basis in reality. It was and continues to be an aggressively successful attempt to unhinge our basic civil liberties in the name of that same irrationally based communist conspiracy. As a result, we have the law enforcement community on the front lines acting as agents of criminal justice who operate on behalf of a system that deliberately intimidates and persecutes Americans who challenge the authority of the federal government. The same federal government that was forced into a position to repeal the 18th Amendment because of the rebellion and violence associated with the illegal sale of alcohol. This is the same exact kind of rebellion and violence that has developed along with and as a result of the war on drugs. There is even evidence to support the fact that the CIA has taken advantage of the war on drugs to help its activities in the name of national security, to help finance its activities in the name of national security, while allowing these same illegal drugs to find their way into the American marketplace. international drug cartels, the American underworld, street gangs, the private prison industry, gun manufacturers, the NRA, the CIA, and the DEA, with support of corporate America and the U.S. Congress, have all profited from the war on drugs. This is a war that has effectively sown the seeds of division in America, with abuses focused on the alleged social depravity of people of poverty and people of color to justify undermining our civil liberties. This is a war where there is no end in sight, because profits outweigh the need to pursue accountability and effective criminal justice reform. This war is a deliberate waste of tax revenue to bankrupt federal and state and local governments and weaken effective governance. It appears to me the only way to get the issue of gun control into an arena where it will be dealt with responsibly is by challenging the effectiveness of the Second Amendment in 21st century America. The sale of AR-15s are setting records as a direct result of the Republican Party and the NRA continuing to feed the general public with socialist and communist conspiracy nonsense. The bulk of those sales going to those same Southern Democrats who followed Strom Thurmond into the Republican Party in rebellion against the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I believe that these same Southern Democrats and their children make up the majority of membership in the NRA. I believe the time has come to get real about the issues of gun control by getting real about the war on drugs as a failed policy designed to take advantage of and further breed division among Americans.